Zoom. A very good evening to you all and welcome to this edition of Hotseat. I am Judith Atim, your host. Now today we have an interesting topic, the shrinking civic space. And we're asking, what should civil society organizations do in order to survive? With me in the studio, two guests, Mr. Marlon Agaba, who is the Executive Director of the Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda. Marlon, you're welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Judith, for having me, and I'm glad to be back.
It's good to see you after such a long time. And Dr. Sarah Birete, the Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. Doctor, you're also most welcome.
Thank you so much. It's always an honor to be hosted on KFM.
Yes. Let's start with understanding exactly what we are dealing with in the civic space. The challenges in particular. So, first of all, what is the importance of having a vibrant and thriving civic space?
Well, civic space basically means, in simpler terms, the enjoyment of freedom of association, expression, and assembly. And this right is necessary for citizens' participation in their governance, to voice out their concerns, demands, wishes, and values, but also to hold leaders accountable. This right is also important for political parties as they participate in their governance to mobilize, recruit, market their programs, but also hold the leaders accountable and keep the government in power in check. This is the civic space we are talking about. When it comes to civil society's work is to voice out. These are platforms. Civil society organizations are platforms for for citizens to participate in governance. And in our Article 72 of the Constitution, it provides that citizens can participate in their governance either through political or civic organizations. The work that we do is to advocate for good governance, for service delivery, for accountability, for fundamental rights and freedoms of the people, for protection of the environment, amongst others, in the benefit of society. So the importance of having a healthy civic space is to make sure that citizens from all spheres of life are free to advocate for their values, wishes, and aspirations, but also demand for accountability from their leaders and protect the environment. I'm emphasizing the environment because we are in the heat wave, we are in the days of really dangerous climate change, and we need to mitigate climate environment. And we have a lot of environmental activists, sometimes at risk, and they are part of our human rights defenders group. So this is the use of the civic space. How do we work with the government agencies, with the citizens, with the regional actors, with international actors for the betterment of society? The challenges we face as civil society actors or NGOs, because civil society is broad, again, for purposes of emphasis, civil society includes academia, media, religious and cultural institutions, among others. But NGOs in particular, we face several challenges that have constrained our space. And among these challenges, we have arrests of human rights defenders. We have office break-ins, especially of NGOs working on governance and human rights in particular, and corruption. And then we have a bureaucratic compliance regime. We report to 7 organizations every year, including for NGOs based in Kampala, KCCA, or the districts for those in the countryside. We report to URA, we report to NSSF, we report to the Financial Intelligence Authority, we report to the NGO Bureau, we report to the Data Protection Unit, and this work is so tedious It would be desirable if we had a one-stop center for our reporting and compliance work, as compared to several multiple centers of compliance. And once you finish with these other centers, then you take your reports and certificates and the compliance reports to the NGO Bureau.
I want to go to Marlon, but before I go to him, I have a question for you. When you look at all these compliance entities, all the 7, that's quite a big number, and it makes your work tedious nonetheless. But do you think there's also a political reason for all these entities that you have to report to?
Basically, this is politics. Let me go look at the Financial Intelligence Authority and the anti-money laundering regime as an example. The anti-money laundering regime internationally was put in place to check the illicit financial flows globally. In other countries, NGOs are not responsible entities when it comes to illicit financial flows, because the funding of NGOs is very clear and transparent, and the people who give us funds file returns, we also file returns, we file entries. So the addition of NGOs as part of the entities at the risk of economic crimes under the Anti-Money Laundering Act is basically policing of the sector. If you look at the regime, the regulations of under the NGO Act, the role of RDCs and all security actors is basically secularization of the sector, and is not necessary. Those are part of the reasons the politics is constraining the space of NGOs in Uganda.
Marlon, Sarah has touched on the state of civic space in Uganda right now, what it looks like, the hurdles that you people have to jump, the regulatory challenges here and there. But I want us to move to some of the root causes of this kind of this trend that we are seeing that is causing the space to actually contract to what it is right now.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think Sarah has already talked about the politics, the political climate, or the politics of the day, that work of civic formations must be curtailed by any means necessary, and because of that politics, we have seen several laws coming up that do really constrain our operations. And Shazebra, of course, talked about the several laws that have been coming up with.
Financial...
like for instance, the Anti-Money Laundering Act that puts on NGOs obligations as accountable organizations to make filings and to file different reports at different time, which of course takes a lot of time. The Public Order Management Act, for instance, that also puts restrictions in terms of gatherings and assemblies. There are a lot of obligations. And the NGO Act, like for instance, if you're going to file returns, there's a whole lot of information that is required, and this is done annually. But also when it comes to renewing of, for instance, of operational permits for NGOs, there is a lot of documentation and unnecessary protocols that you go through. Go to the LCs, you go to the RDCs to get recommendations, you go to different agencies, which is not necessary, because if an NGO has already been operating for some time and they're just renewing their permit, I mean, why should they go through a whole long process of things that they need to submit to be able to do their work. And of course, there are several other laws, like even the Computer Misuse Act, for instance. If you are in accountability, in a way it limits the work that we do. And of course, there are also several other factors. Because of the politics, at the end of the day, you find that even other aspects besides the legislations that we have, the funding and the climate becomes quite challenging. We had, like for instance, the Democratic Governance Facility, which was closed down by government and was funding accountability work and civic engagement. We have had, because of the space and the tension between government and some of the donors, we have had other people who have been supporting work that promote civic space and civic engagement, actually leaving Uganda and putting their resources elsewhere. So those are some of the challenges, but also I think as civil society, we also there are things that we can do on our own and be able to reclaim this space. I'm talking about some of the internal challenges that we have that we also need to address, especially in relation to diversifying our streams of funding and finding alternative sources of funding that can really sustain us in the work we are doing. But by and large, of course, the politics, which transcends down into the legal framework and the structure and the way the NGOs are working, all these have really contributed to the shrinking civic space.
Okay. So when we look at the kind of work you do, let's not just focus on ACU and CCTG. There are other NGOs especially that are going down to grassroots and reaching out to them, strengthening accountability, encouraging citizens to participate in governance processes and systems. Collectively, how do you see your engagement as CSOs with grassroots people being affected by all these events that are taking place that are causing the shrinking of the space?
Of course, the non-government organizations are quite diverse in nature and in composition. There are NGOs that are networks and at the national level in the different sectors, whether it is water or women empowerment, accountability like we're doing. We have like the NGO forum, which brings together different organizations. And by structure, they have networks and they do collaborate. All the work they do goes down to the grassroots. So there is that kind of connection. I think it is there could be only probably a few organizations that don't have structures, but most of the organizations actually do have structures that go down
to the grassroots.
And also when you look at the challenges that we face as organizations operating at the national level, they are not so much different from those challenges being faced by organizations working at the grassroots. Sarah talked about the issue of RDCs, for instance, policing NGOs. It's a very big challenge. When you look at all these compliance requirements, they are facing the same regime of compliance. When you look at all the things of renewing their permits, they face the same challenges. And also when you look at funding, you find that more or less we are competing for the same fund. So we more or less face the same challenges.
Let's talk about strategies for survival. What tactics are you employing going forward, Sarah?
Well, the main tactic is to build the resilience of the organization, but also the staff that we work with. What strategies do we have? First of all, we must change our strategic plans to be adaptive to the changing context. Change the mission and vision to make sure that it fits into the context that we are in. Because when some of these or majority of these NGOs were founded, the space had not shrunk to the extent that we are in today. So we must adjust to the changing context, and those strategies must be adaptive. We need to have a resilient team and systems. How resilient are our staff? Because an organization cannot exist without its core staff, with its, the beneficiaries, the major constituencies that we work with. For example, CCG works in universities. There's a whole changing terrain in universities. If you take an example of Makerere University, where even campaigns in guild elections are banned, meaning that the freedom of association, assembly, and expression at the ivory tower is in question. And the leadership starts or gets
at those institutions.
Yes. So what is the context in institutions of learning? Most of the universities now have made it a norm to ban political party association. We are in a multi-party dispensation. What kind of leadership are we nurturing? If you look at all Africa's pre-independence leaders, they were university students. So if the universities then had behaved in a draconian manner, like the universities of today, who would have fought for the independence of Africa? When you look at political debates, the vigilant political debates, we all used to keep attending at Makerere. Do you hear of them anymore? Makeri is now like a kindergarten of sorts when it comes to the political maturity of the minds, when it comes to the free expression, a marketplace of ideas that defines a university. Makeri is just an academic entity now. There is no growth. There is no holistic growth of students anymore. So that contributes to shrinking our spaces in terms of nurturing a democratic culture that my organization and other people work on. When it comes to aspects like systems, because at times our websites are taken down, hacked into, you find you can't communicate because once your website is taken down, all the official emails are down, the financial systems are now digital. So we need to build resilience around these systems and make sure that we have the protection for hacking. And now we are faced with a challenge of artificial intelligence in governance, which has also created another kind of problem with the disinformation and deep fakes. And going into the elections we are going into, we will have to deal with the issue of disadvantages of AI. So we have to keep upgrading and keeping up with the developing trends.
Well, on that note, let's take a break and then we come back and discuss more on the coping strategies that you are employing as civil society.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. 933 KFM's Hot Seat. Hot Seat. Hear the real story behind the story. Coming right at you. Only on 933 KFM.
Welcome back from the break. This is still the Hot Seat. My name is Judith Atim. We are still discussing the shrinking civic space, and we're asking what should civil society organizations do to survive. My guests, once again, I have Marlon Agaba, the Executive Director, Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda, and Dr. Sarah Birete, the Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. Before we went into the break, we were talking about strategies for CSOs to survive amidst these challenges that they're facing, be it political and so on. And Sarah, you were telling us about building resilience in terms of IT resilience and so on. I think, Marlon, you could pick it up from there.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think there are several ways in which we need to really strengthen our resilience, and one of them, we already talked about the grassroots structures. I think if we strengthen our membership and grassroots level structures, that also could be quite helpful. We need to have a base as organizations, and I think we need to represent the issues that really affect people. And we have seen several instances where citizens have stood out for particular issues and have actually come up successful. Recently, we saw what happened in Senegal.
Yes.
With the plan to hijack the constitution and the electoral process and extend someone's stay in power. But we saw citizens insisting, and we have seen the results that the citizens have achieved actually what they wanted. So I think when you have these structures, I think that can also help in a way. Sarah talked about building alliances. That is quite important, and working together on issues, thematic issues that affect the country. I believe that is important, that civil society organizations that are like-minded and working on things that affect them, they should really work together and also engage other bodies, whether here or internationally, that are working on these spaces. When you look, there's several, whether international financial institutions or other governance institutions at the national level that can support in terms of the work we do, but also in terms of helping us to secure the civic space. I think that is quite important. Of course, also the issue of funding is quite important for NGOs, because I think that is one of the areas that have been targeted actually by government in terms of scaring away the donors or chasing them. So we really need to see how can we diversify actually, in terms of funding streams.
Yes. I wanted I wanted you to expound on that some more, because we live in a society where we don't have the financial muscle for me to, for example, come and say, okay, I'm going to be a philanthropy and give maybe Sarah this amount of money or give Marlon this amount of money to run his activities in ACO effectively. So in a society such as ours, how then can you ensure you have a good sustainability plan financially without relying on foreign support?
I think one, if you have a very good cause, you should be able to attract very good membership. The organizations that NGOs that have members 20,000, members 50,000, and these are members that pay annual subscription. Like I said, depending on the cause you are really working on and how you present that to the citizens of Uganda. If for instance, you're working on issues of education, issues of women empowerment, or issues of corruption, these are issues that affect all Ugandans, and any Ugandan would want to be associated with that cause. So they can support this work, even if they are contributing 1,000 or 5,000, they can really support the work. But I think we haven't really invested so much in building membership and building movements from the grassroots. The other thing that NGOs can do, they can do social enterprises. Section 46 of the NGO Act 2016 actually allows organized NGOs to do social enterprises, and there are some of them that have funded enterprises. They have business arms, whether it is money lending, whether it is social enterprises producing products here and there. And we have seen some of them that have been able to sustain their operations through social enterprises that they are doing. And other areas, NGOs have a lot of information that has been built over time. We have been hearing here Dr. Sarah speaking. She's an encyclopedia. So how do you turn that knowledge into resources for the organization? So I think there are areas we already have our own strong areas that we can actually exploit to enhance our survival, especially financially.
Would you like to add something to that, Sarah? Or maybe we move to the issue of adaptation. How do you intend to adapt? How do you build resilience for CSOs?
Well, just on diversifying sources of funding, what I can add is the business arm of NGOs. The NGO Act allows some NGOs to establish businesses are in line with their registered objectives. So that's also another arm that can help raise some little resources for the day-to-day running of the NGOs. In terms of adaptability, the first issue that NGOs have to do is to make sure they build capacity for compliance. Because the legal regime that we are faced with, as much as we protest, it's a archaic nature. We have to comply so long as these are laws of Uganda until they are set aside, because some of them are being challenged in courts of law. But so long as they are still laws, then you have to comply with them if you want to be in the sector. So that's the first adaptability issue. The second adaptability issue is to keep what I would call a clean house. We saw, of course, there are several issues that shrink our space. First, you could have a siege around offices, and something we didn't mention in the act. There's a time ActionAid International, Greece, and a few other offices were put under siege, documents taken, and so we could be run over by police, by URA, by any entity. So we need to keep our records in order because of the context we work in. The third adaptability issue is to have staff that are really working because of a passion and not looking for money.
And how do you ensure that? That's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one, but it's the most important one. We all need money to survive. I'm not discounting the importance of money, but we have funding fluctuations in the NGO sector that you cannot avoid. So when that gap happens, who are the people that are able to push an extra 1 or 2 months as you raise funds? Once you don't have that team of people saying, we are in for better, for worse, and they are looking at NGOs as if it's a bank job, as if it's a diplomatic job, then those cannot build the necessary resilience for the context that we are in.
I entirely agree with Dr. Sarah's submission. I think we have no option for now but to comply with the requirements that we're working in, but also continuing the advocacy efforts in terms of not only challenging but also having engagements where possible with government to address some of the challenges we are facing. I know there have been engagements, for instance, with the Financial Intelligence Authority and other agencies on removing NGOs from the list of accountable organizations. And I think also we need to, we cannot have just one approach or two. We need to have several approaches to really address this problem. So I think engagement is also good, but also looking at the other approaches as well. Dr. Sarah has talked about the issue of cleaning house, and I really want to emphasize it that as NGOs also, we need also to put our houses in order first before we even look at other external factors, because there are challenges that have happened to NGOs, and unfortunately some of them have closed because of some internal challenges and weaknesses here and there.
Could you just mind sharing some of these internal
like for example, we talked about the issue of compliance. If, for instance, you are required to submit returns on an annual basis and you don't submit returns, I think in a way you are attracting
scrutiny. You're actually inviting
to come and increase the scrutiny. But also, I think number two, we need to increase the legitimacy of the work we are doing by really championing the issues of the people that we say we are championing their issues. In terms of the issue of corruption, we really need to address challenges of corruption and accountability in our organizations, because I know that is a challenge that has been coming. So really there are those, and then also the other aspect is the aspect of governance, board governance and management. And there have been several NGOs that have actually been affected by fights between the board and management, and that alone has affected, even before you talk about external factors. So we really need to do all that, but also look at how we can do things differently. Right now, the traditional civic space as we know it has been shrinking, but there are several other spaces that keep coming up over time. Right now, there's a lot of work going on social media, using digital platforms, and I think we should really invest. And I don't think that civil society right now, we are really investing time in learning, for instance, how to use the new technologies as we should be. And I think that really we need to work on that if we are to keep up with all these challenges.
So the
if I
issue
may add on something,
please.
Yeah, because on creative ways of doing work, like Gaba says, we need to leverage technology. And
we're going into a break just shortly after that, Sarah.
Yeah, we need to leverage technology because it's easier to reach many people using technological ways than having a few people in a workshop. So we need to have hybrid events. We need to have, even when and it's less costly, for example, to have a space and you have the conversation going on, part of advocacy, part of sensitization. You can even conduct a training. During the 2021 elections, we did all our voter observer trainings using digital means, and meaning that, so we need to cope and carry the lessons we learned during the COVID lockdowns. But we also need to work with others. If you have 3 or 4 organizations working on a common objective, it's difficult to pinpoint or attack all of them at the same time. Like we have the Civic Space Coalition in Uganda. We have especially many of these contentious issues. So you find that you spread the risk and you protect each other in the process.
Okay, let's take a break and then we continue after that.
KFM's Hot Seat. It's hot, it's live, provocative, and digs deep into the issue. Topics live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. KFM's Hot Seat covers all the relevant topics every weekday, 7 to 8 p.m.
That's right, you're still listening to 93.3 KFM. This is the Hot Seat. My name is Judith Atim. I'm sitting in for Patrick Kamara. My guests here, Maluna Gaba, Executive Director, Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda, Dr. Sarah Birete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. And our topic is the shrinking civic space. And we're asking, what should civil society organizations do to survive? Before we went into the break, we were looking at strategies for survival and then how to adapt and build resilience. And Sarah was taking us through building capacity, innovation, and so on. But now there has always been question of just how much trust do we as citizens have in our civil society organizations, or NGOs in particular. And earlier, before we went into the break, Marlon actually alluded to issues of corruption, and the need for cleaning house. But I just wanted us to talk about just how pervasive is corruption in the NGO sector. And Sarah, let me start with you.
Yeah, so there has been several allegations of corruption in the NGO sector. Previously, some organizations have even come under scrutiny in investigations, like the Uganda Land Alliance, and several others. And there's a time there was a whole investigation by the DGF Basket Fund with the allegations of kickbacks by the staff of DGF, and that is connivance between the NGO leaders and the staff on the donor side. But there are also several allegations regarding the donor NGO relations that keep happening. So the best way to address these allegations, maybe also to underscore that the relationship normally in the funding terrain is individual. You have an individual organization that believes in your vision, mission, which matches their vision.
Yeah.
And then they do due diligence and find that you are a credible partner, because nobody throws money at NGOs. It's a process of negotiations, building confidence, verifications for somebody to sign off a grant, however small or big, for you to manage. This process is conducted through audits, several audit reports that we conduct, and maybe citizens could have seen NGOs that were suspended by the NGO Bureau. Some of them had not even conducted audits for years, some of them. So you have that challenges and maybe oversight challenges in particular NGOs. So maybe some said they didn't have funds to conduct audits because some grants don't come with money for audits. So there are several issues that determine how organizations are run. From the time that we were partnering with the DGF, we adopted a cashless system. Now I'm giving a
how you manage finances.
Example.
Yes.
So we operate a financial cashless system, purely digital. All transactions are traceable. The money trail, and we give these links to donors. That has helped us improve confidence, even where there are allegations, because there's a time allegations were thrown at us. These people are corrupt, these people. Then the partners asked and said, but we have digital trail of our money. Both the digital trail of the money, but also digital trail of the work. And they said, we have no problem. And our partners were not shaken by the allegations. But what system do you use? So if we didn't have a digitalized system of both activity and financial, maybe the allegations would have thrown CCG off the map. But the partners found no truth in whatever was thrown at the NGO. And that's how NGOs can build systems that speak for themselves, so that regardless of whatever people say, you don't lose the confidence with your partners. You don't lose the confidence or fail to comply, for example, with the NGO Bureau, because your documents are not in order. Even when we are doing audits, it does not take us even a week, because all the work is digitalized. And we are able to finish, comply on time. And so these are internal systems that we need to build. But before I go away from the internal system, there's also something that shrinks the space of NGOs. So there's intrigue. Since we are looking at the internal
and how to clean
governance,
house, yes.
There is intrigue by some NGO leaders who capitalize on rumor mongering and the blackmail of their fellow colleagues. And that then you have the donor community which finds they have a narrow source of information. They don't even give a right of a fair hearing to the people that are being blackmailed, and then they all go blacklisting NGOs. And I find it really disturbing, because most of these partners are the people who cherish fundamental rights and freedoms, but they don't find it fit to give other people a right to a fair hearing, and they buy one-sided stories that are full of intrigue. That also shrinks our space internally. Yeah.
Marlon, I don't know if at ACU you also have these kinds of systems and controls in place, digital system, tracking systems for monitoring how your money is spent, how it's disbursed, and if this is something that the wider NGO space can actually take up. Because I think it makes the issues of transparency very important, especially where spending money is concerned.
Yeah, civil society is quite diverse. I can't say that we are all at the same level, but the challenges of corruption, like Dr. Sarah talked about, they are there. And we have seen these challenges surfacing. We have seen organizational funding being suspended. We have seen organizations, several of them closing, and we have seen organizations that used to be big and vibrant going silent because of money and because of corruption challenges. But I think we also need to appreciate that we are not all the same, and there are really organizations that have really invested time. They have learned over time and have put their systems together. Sarah talked about the issue of online payments, and I think this is quite important. When you look at most of the corruption that was happening then, of paper-based signing and what, it's not there. All payments, 99% or even more, apart from petty cash maybe, they are online. There is a digital trail for each and every payment. There is a purpose why the payment is being made. And there are even systems that are shared, whether it's a Sun system or whatever system, where somebody in New York or in Brussels can
log in and see
the transactions that you are doing. So we have those kinds of systems, and those have helped quite a lot. And also other compliance things that we need to do. We do audit. We do audit. Even donors, by the way, send their own auditors who are independent, and they come and do audit, which provides that extra assurance that the work we're doing. And also due diligence, like Dr. Sarah said, that any serious donor will definitely come and due diligence. They come and do monitoring. Some of them even do spot checks, unannounced. They are there and they're checking in terms of what we are doing. So I want to say that much as we have those challenges, but I think there is also a breed of organizations that have grown, that have put in place systems that have, and another area, by the way, is separation of roles between the boards and the management. And when you look at most organizations that have been quite challenged, the problems have emanated from the boards and management failing to know where their roles start and stop. But I think there are organizations that have really invested in that, in terms of having clear separation of roles between the board and management, and plus the other things that we really have been doing, the audit, the submission of documents to different government agencies, URA, we have to submit to file taxes. And that also is done digitally. You do the filing online, and there's documentation to that as well. So I think it's improvement, and of course, in some instances, the agencies from government actually do come to check and see your compliance, whether it is
the NGO bureau can also, they can do spot check,
or even NSSF will come and see whether KCCA. So I think really
so the controls are at every level, locally and internationally.
There is room for
improvement.
Improvement.
Okay, I'm glad that exhaustively addresses the issue of transparency and accountability. So now let's move on to the other aspect of community engagement. How are you moving forward with all these challenges that you're facing? How are you engaging your communities?
Most of our communities, like I said, our main constituency is universities in Uganda. So we engage our communities using partly the digital tools, but we also do physical engagement, because digital alone
can't reach everyone.
Takes away some element of body language and understanding each other. So we engage our communities through physical and digital engagement. We also engage our outreach through the Digital Civic Space TV that is part of our digital tools. But mainly the work that we do, and we are developing 2 more tools that we want to bring on, before the 2026 elections, because we do mainly civic education and election observation where conducive, because we might have to talk about 2026 and the rule. Yeah, because we do that work preparation even when we are unable to observe elections, because there's uncertainty surrounding observation of elections in Uganda for domestic election observers. But we will do civic education because that's part of our registered objectives as an entity.
Let's take a break and then we'll be back.
KFM's Hot Seat. It's hot, it's live, provocative, and digs deep into the issues. KFM's Hot Seat. Hot Seat. Hear the real story behind the story. Coming right at you. Only on 933 KFM.
Welcome back. It is the Hot Seat here on 93.3 KFM. I'm Judith Atim. And our topic is the shrinking civic space. What should civil society organizations do to survive? Before we went into the break, we were talking about how the NGO world or sector can actually push their community engagement in order to reach out more and do their work effectively. But Sarah and Marlon, like I was telling you during the break, the reading that anyone can have in light of the shrinking civic space is that a number of NGOs are now running away from the difficult topic of governance, holding leaders accountable to I can't say they're not important. They're still equally important issues, but I see there's a tendency to avoid that hard conversation of democracy and good governance. I don't know if this is a reality that you as actors in this space are aware of. Marlon, I could start with you.
Yeah, it is true. And
what Sarah calls the fear factor.
It's a reality, and I think most people have been calling it self-censorship. Yeah, because of the environment that we do work in. And even organizations that, as per their mandate, accountability organizations, see them folding hands and really taking really. Not doing the work they should be doing. And this is not only, by the way, civil society organizations, even donors. There are donors that
now moving
are fearing to support work of democracy, civic education, elections, and accountability because
they are running into economic rights, safer area.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, also now there is another new development of where most of the donors actually who want to still support accountability work are running away from civil society to the private sector organizations and umbrellas because their approaches are somehow different from ours. Yeah, so it is true that we are facing those challenges, but I think we have clear mandate provided by the Constitution and several other laws of this country that we need to protect and advance.
But Sarah, you seem to have a thick skin. Where do you get this thick skin from? You're holding fort, you're still pushing. Why haven't you run away to something else? Why are you still there in that space?
Like I said, now when I'm recruiting staff, I recruit passion. Passion can sustain you through difficult challenges. We have reached a stage where governance work is not an arena for comfort and convenience, because there are a lot of turbulences. Turbulences both by the state, even donors. Donors have run away from funding critical governance issues in this country, especially the ones based in Uganda. They want to fund what is in the category of comfort and convenience. Even donors have classified people as dangerous actors. When we fund these ones,
high
the
risk.
state will check on us, politically exposed. So when you have this, the donor community also being affected by the fear factor. So you find that most of our actors now, partners, are not based in Uganda. Because the ones in Uganda, the self-censorship mode is so high. They want to fund what is comfortable and convenience. Even the closure of DGF sent another kind of shiver into the donor community. And some of the embassies shifted to focusing on environment, climate change, digital rights, economic rights.
Refugees.
But they don't want, refugees, but they don't want to fund. The challenge with the fundamental rights and freedoms. They don't want to change civic space issues, enabling people to build resilience and push back. They don't want to fund the hard accountability questions that our government and other colleagues work with. So you find that the fear factor is both ways. So some civil society has migrated into service delivery.
Yeah.
Because service delivery, there is no censorship.
Yes.
There is no agency that will be closed. There will be no break-ins. There will be no physical and digital surveillance that we go through. Sometimes you wake up and you find there's a new border stage around your office. All of a sudden, they are fresh-looking Matembei. You find Mtembei with the iPhone 15. What kind of a hawker would have an iPhone 15? You know, all these are people that do physical surveillance around our offices, and they are common in the minister's village where we are based.
Okay. So when you are doing public awareness, I mean, what is your role in educating the public on their civic rights and why it's important for them? Especially as we are getting into this critical season heading to 2026.
Yes. Our objective or vision and mission as a Center for Constitutional Governance is to build a center that empowers people to fully exercise their constitutional rights and obligations and defend and protect the Constitution. So that includes the element of civic education to create active citizenry and empower people with the knowledge and skills to demand accountability, push back, but also defend and protect the Constitution. So that's the major contribution that we make. But we also have elections as a clear thematic area. And we do civic education, vote education, and election observation in Uganda, but also in the Eastern Horn of Africa. So,
Marlon, let's talk about legal challenges and how you can collectively push back, especially some of these repressive laws that are actually hurting your operations in the NGO world.
I think there are several things that we can do, or we are doing. Already there are organizations that have taken on the legal course. Like when we had the freezing of bank accounts, for instance, I know some organizations went to court and actually won, and I think that helps in terms of providing precedence for other organizations as well. So I think really interventions, but also engagement. Another thing is engagement on some where the will is to engage, to readdress and remove some of these provisions that are quite restrictive to the work that we are doing, and also collaborating. There are also international mechanisms, by the way, that can help, that can protect, that can address challenges of impunity, that we can also tap into and really work together to address the challenges that we are facing. But also quite importantly, the work done by the human rights defenders and human rights defender organizations is also quite important in terms of the help that we can get when we have challenges, like when your office has been broken into or when you have been arrested. Yeah, so those are some of the interventions that we can really work on. Yeah.
So we have to wind up. And let me ask you, Sarah, what would be your message out there to someone listening in terms of how to work with CSOs or what support you need and maybe how they can be involved and how they can participate?
So for me, my key messages are two best. One is that civic organizations are volunteer organizations. We set our own objectives and go out to fulfill them, and this is a right guaranteed in our Constitution. So when these civic or volunteer organizations are set up, my call to the citizens is that you utilize them. We have a lot of information. We do research. We compile reports on a daily basis. But when these reports or the research that we do is not accessed by the people, then it's of no use, because the purpose of this information that we compile and work with is meant to empower the citizens and make them better advocates of good governance and constitutionalism in Uganda. My call is that reach out, get information, get skills, participate in your governance.
Malone, your parting shot in light of...
I think Dr. Sarah has said it quite well. Citizens need to be involved in terms of the work that we do. There are so many associations, there are so many organizations doing good work. So I think citizens need to, first of all, find out and get involved in the work that we do as civil society organizations. But lastly, as citizens, they need to be active. Even if they're not in associations, there are things that they can do to protect their own civic space. They can expose corruption, they can say no to corruption, they have rights to engage in political processes. So as citizens, let us also play our civic duties and responsibilities, which are constitutional, by the way.
Thank you very much, Malone, and Dr. Sarah Birete of the Center for Constitutional Governance, as well as the ED for Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda. That's Malone Gaba. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. The Hot Seat returns on Monday, and have yourselves a good weekend. My name is Judith Atim.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight.